All right, Small Town Cop here, and excuse me. Time for another little Bible study. I always say I try to keep these short, but they always end up being about 25 minutes long, so I'm just going to say it's going to be the regular length of time it takes me to do this. Been reading this book. Got a few on my shelf that are, bedside, that are on my list to be reading. This one is by two Christians who are actually still Christians, just so we're understanding. Deconstruction is when you leave the faith. These guys are talking about why people do it, why it's a bad thing, why a lot of the church is doing it, and sometimes not even realizing it. Sometimes acting like they're still Christians. That goes for the progressive church. That goes for what I call fair weather Christians, fair weather Christianity, where, yeah, we believe this until it's inconvenient, until it gets in the way of our happiness. And in reading this, I was really reminded, I shouldn't say reminded, I've heard the name before in the Bible, of course, but I never really put two and two together until they said it, like, about the guy Demas. And if you haven't read this book or gotten this book, very good read. At times it's painful to read. It's one of these things, because I'm going to talk about it again today, is Christians not being Christians, church not being the church. I hate talking because I don't want to be bashing the church, because it's one, Christ's bride, and I grew up in the church. I love the church. I love what it should be. But of late, it's not been that. Now, I know there's churches all throughout my life. I know there have been churches that I thankfully have never attended, but I know of them. Joel Osteen's church, those snake handling churches, which come from Pentecostal. Yes, those people are crazy. Mormon church, Joseph of Witnesses, Islam. There's all these other religions that, no, they're not right. And I'll be so bold as to say, no, they are not right. There is not all one path to God. There is only one path to God. Unfollow me, I don't care. Not backing down on that one. And no, Mormons do not believe in the same God as this book says. They make some really good Christian shows, though, apparently. And TV. They just don't talk about their Mormonness in the show, which is odd. I think I heard that The Chosen is Mormon. At least like the director, the guy who came up with the whole show is Mormon, I think. I don't know. I've seen a little bit of it. I've liked it. I honestly, for some reason, I haven't been able to sit down and watch that show. I don't know what it is. But anyway, we're going to talk about Demas, and we're going to talk. And again, it's probably a name you've never heard of, or you've read in the Bible and it said like, oh, it's like all those other guys that Paul and Peter wrote, like, oh, hey, tell. Like here it says, say hello to Prisca and Aquila and the household of Onesiphorus. Greek Morpheus without the M. But it shows here, and Paul was dealing with it here, so we shouldn't be surprised of the church falling away at the beginning, because it's a human thing. The church has been struggling to stay faithful to Christ, just like the Hebrews were struggling to stay faithful to God from the beginning. It's always been a problem because we want our way. And as I talk about this tonight, I'm not talking about one person, one group. I'm talking about us. We have to guard us, me included, from being this way. Because just because you think the church is falling away doesn't mean you're not guilty too. And we have to be careful of that. Extremely careful of that. So let me read here, do more reading this time, because last time I didn't do a lot of reading. And actually, we're going to start off. That should be right here. Yes, this is 1 Timothy 6, and we're going to start off with verse 6. Actually, godliness is a great source of profit when it is combined with being happy with what you already have. We didn't bring anything into the world, and so we can't take anything out of it. We'll be happy with food and clothing. But people who are trying to get rich fall into temptation. They are trapped by many stupid and harmful passions that plunge people into ruin and destruction. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Oh, again, the love of money, not money. Some have wandered away from the faith and have impaled themselves with a lot of pain because they made money their goal. Now I want to stop right there. This is addressing money, and it's an idol. This can be replaced. You take money out and put any other thing that could be good, but that you've made it essentially your God. You've made it all you're working towards. And you're willing to sacrifice what God has told you to do for it. You could say, love and his review. Some have wandered away from the faith and have impaled themselves because they've made a certain job their goal, a certain career status their goal, a certain piece of property their goal, a certain lifestyle their goal, a certain whatever. And if they've been willing to compromise the gospel, living it out, not just telling it, living it out for that, yeah, you're going to bring yourself into destruction. Because you can't serve two masters. At the end of your life, when you stand before the throne of God, and I truly believe this is going to be the case, we will do this because it says so, and I believe it makes sense. Now, of course, you always have the forgiveness of God if you believe in Jesus. But at the end of your life, will you have true will you be said to you, welcome, my good and faithful servant? Or God say, depart from me? Because while you had the illusion of following God, just like when Jesus says, those who, they'll say, Lord, Lord, when have we've prophesied in your name, we've done all this, and he's like, depart from me, I never knew you. When push comes to shove, that's a better way of saying it. When push comes to shove, right now, are you choosing to live for the gospel or whatever your dream idol thing is? And I've had to repent of that myself. Don't get me wrong. I have definitely put my career above my family at times. I have put my career above the speaking about God sometimes, because I knew it would possibly get me in trouble. And that's what's funny is what this past year or so has done to me is like, fine, I'll be in trouble. I don't care. I'm gonna stand on what I really believe. Period. So I can say that's been a good thing that's come out of this past year and a half. Is I have no baggage and fear of standing on what I really believe. And not that I was trying to back down from it before, but I would say I'm not that good of a Christian. And so I don't know why I even got into saying that. But now I know, I have had job interviews where I've said, like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. There was one interview I did, and this lady used the whole equity and stuff thing and about, racial stuff. I was like, yeah, I'm not playing that game. I was like, I don't care what your race is. I'm going to treat you the same as everybody else. And I've And that's more of a political stance, but I've stood up on other things like, no, like that's just wrong. This is the right thing to do, regardless of whether or not people like it. It's the right thing to do. So, a bit more bold than that. I'm sure somebody will say like you haven't changed in your boldness in that, and it's part of me says thinks I would be, but in here, Paul is talking to us about falling away because we've made something else our goal in life, something else what we are living for. And Paul is very clear, it has to be Christ. It has to be the gospel. It has to be making sure we are living for God who saved us. And being willing to tell people about that at every chance we have. And the church has been falling away from that since the word go. Because it was falling away from that during Jeremiah, Isaiah, Micah, everybody else's time. I mean, Jesus was arguing with the Pharisees because he was there to fulfill the prophecies, to be the Messiah. And they're like, well, no, because we wanted you to come be our conquering king, not our king to save us from sin. I think even Ben Shapiro said like, oh, it was supposed to be a political thing. And when I read my Old Testament, politics is there, but it's always a side issue to the sin problem of the nation of Israel. The saying is true. Politics is downstream from culture, and God repeatedly is dealing with the sin culture of Israel that influences the politics. It's never, ever been just this political thing. It's always been, hey, I mean, Jeremiah is not talking to him about like, hey, you need to select a better king. He's saying you are sinning against God. You need to repent. They're all saying the same thing. It's always a sin issue. All the Old Testament is always dealing with a sin issue. It's not a political, the wrong party, the wrong economic forum format thing. It's always been a sin issue. It's been a cultural sin issue. Getting back on topic. But as for you, man of God, run away from all these things. Instead, pursue righteousness, holy living, faithfulness, love, endurance, and gentleness. Compete in the good fight of faith. Grab hold of eternal life. You were called to it, and you made a good confession of it in the presence of many witnesses. So, there's a few places before I get to here, and I also want to talk about them, we'll flip through them, but where Demas has noted that, hey, he's been with Paul, he's worked with Paul, he's known as a good work with Paul. There at one point, it says that, hey, both the Demas and Luke, the physician, say hi. That's literally what it says in the Bible. They say hello. But here, we see our problem with an example of our problem with the church today, which has always been a problem, which we always have to guard ourselves against. We always have to guard ourselves against, because I've got to guard myself against it. Just because you're one of the ones like me speaking against the church falling away does not mean I'm not susceptible to it. I've always got to keep that mirror in front of me of, am I falling into the exact same thing? Am I excusing my own sin? Am I doing the whole, I've got a plank in my eye, trying to call out the splinter in someone else's? So always, when I'm speaking, always taking the fact of like, I am very aware of my own sin, and I need to be constantly repenting, constantly forgiving. I've said this before, forgiveness and repentance is like a bath. You need it all the time, or a shower if you're an adult. I don't know. I can't sit in the bath. I feel like it's weird. It's just juvenile. I'm sure women are like, oh, that's lovely, but I'm like, no. Seems too kiddie to me. But here we hear about Demas. And it's just this one verse. This one verse that just sums up the problem. This is 2 Timothy 4:9. Do your best to come to me quickly. Demas has fallen in love with the present world and has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Cretan has gone to Galatia, and Titus has gone to Dalmatia. Yeah. So we don't have any indication really that Crescens gone to Galatia and Titus to Dalmatia. Malchi. I don't know. I don't speak Greek. That they have done anything bad. But we do see that Demas has fallen in love with the present world and has deserted me. Falling in love with the present world is a huge problem for all of us. It's a huge problem with the church. There are Christians who think they are living for Christ who are really just in love with the world, and Christ is along for the ride. It goes back to what I was talking about is God with Saul and David. Is God your genie, your ritual that you have to do in order to win your battles? Or is he really God in your life? Is he really the ultimate authority in your life? Is he something you're just checking in with? Like, is there a loophole that I can do this and still be a Christian in the Bible? If you're looking for loopholes to excuse yourself on something, you know you're wrong. Now, there are things that, because the Bible talks about those like smaller things, like eating food, that someone else thinks is like this, or, because they think it's an idle thing now, but eating certain foods, or whether it's what gifts of the Spirit are still out there, cessationists or continuation, small things like that. Like, those aren't loophole things to excuse your behavior. Those are things you're simply trying to figure out what's right. And that's good to do. But how many of us have gone through this Bible looking for a time when God said that what we wanted to be okay doing, which we knew was wrong, we want to find a time when God says okay under these certain circumstances. And if you're fishing through the Bible for a loophole, you're probably going to just twist something into your loophole, knowing that it's wrong, but you'll get some other Christian, some other spiritual leader, I'll say, spiritual person, and get them. They'll also have gone down that path, and they'll say, oh yeah, I have this title, so yeah, and I do this, it's totally fine. I mean, we've got gay pastors. There's a gay deacon or something here in the town I live in, which is despicable. There are a lot of ministers in this area who do not take a stand on very clear biblical doctrines of, like, hey, this is a sin. This abortion is a sin. Divorce without the three unrepentant reasons of abuse, abandonment, or adultery. Without those unrepentant three, you don't get divorced. You work that crap out. On female pastors, and I've worked under female children's pastors, but like head pastors. Not taking a stance again on like LGBT stuff and sin. Not taking a stance on that's one of their hot button topics. Well, not even hot button topics, but just making sure you actually preach the gospel in your services. It's not just about smiling and about making people feel nice. It's like, hey, are we staying repentant? Or making sure God is our God, not our genie? Things like that. Are we just trying to smooth over the big issues going on in our world and not talk about them in church because they're upsetting? Because they're and again, I look at the Old Testament, and we've got this saying that's about, 80 to 60 years old now, that says, like, we don't talk religion or politics. And look what that has got us. Because we don't talk religion and politics, both at the dinner table and in church, we've got a church and a dinner table that are completely just destroyed. I mean, just awful. Families are broken apart. The church is just not even half the churches in the country anymore are not real churches. Probably more than half, because they didn't want to take a stand that might make them a target to the world or upset people in their congregation, and people might leave. They are in love with the present world. If you're more concerned, if your goal being a Christian is to get something out of it that's not just salvation, you're in love with the present world. If you're willing to sell what you believe, to sell out what you believe, when it gets hard or when you need something that's not in line with it, you're in love with the present world. And we all will struggle with this. All of us will. That's one of the roots of sin in our lives. There's, the world, the flesh, and the devil. But the difference between the Christian and the one who's in love with the world is that we are repentant and you hate your sin. There's stuff I still do that I hate. When I lose my temper, when I'm struggling with certain things, I hate that I'm struggling with it. But that's the difference is, excusing your sin versus hating your sin and wanting to get as far away from it as you can. Stay repentant. The sin you like, stay repentant of it. The sin you think you need to get you through whatever, stay repentant of it. Stay away from it. It's the hardest thing. Don't excuse it. Demas has fallen in love with the present world and has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. And I'll end with this little section here. I'm giving you this commission in the presence of God and Jesus Christ, who is coming to judge the living and the dead, and by his appearance and by his kingdom. Preach the word. Be ready to do it when it's convenient or inconvenient. Correct, confront, and encourage with patience and instruction. There will come a time when people will not tolerate sound teaching. They will collect teachers who say what they want to hear because they are self-centered. They will turn their back on the truth and turn to myths. But you must keep control of yourself in all circumstances. Endure suffering. Do the work of a preacher of the good news and carry out your service faithfully. Fully, faithfully, the same thing. And this is the hardest thing is I know people who have turned to something that tickles their own ears. They collect teachers who will say what they want to hear. Being a true follower of Christianity, a true follower of Jesus, will put you as the minority even in the church, by and large. There are exceptions, absolutely. There are churches I've been to where, yes, not everybody in the room, but a lot of the people in the room, you get talking like, oh, wow, okay, you are really living for the gospel. That is awesome. I'm not here with that right now, but I'm hopeful. But don't be surprised when you see so many churches falling away and so many Christians just going after 2 Timothy 4. What is this, 2? No, 3. There will come a time, and it's already here, and it's been here. We will not tolerate sound teaching. They'll collect teachers who say what they want to hear because they are self-centered. Don't let that be you. We're going to know people that's going to be them. Preach repentance to them. Reach them as best you can. Do whatever you can, but I've been doing it too. Man, sometimes you've done all you can, and it's just in God's hands. And that is a hard place to be sometimes, because especially like me, you're a fixer, you want to do, but oftentimes, when they're here, that's Pharaoh territory. Only God can fix that. And I pray for so many people I know he does. But Don't be surprised, but don't let it be you. I guess that's my big takeaway for tonight is don't be surprised, but mourn with them, for them, I should say, because they're not mourning. Mourn for them, pray for them, keep going. Pray something happens in their life that turns them away from this, the tickling ear of preaching. But you be willing to suffer. In all circumstances, endure suffering, do the work of a preacher of the good news, and carry out your service fully. You do this with kindness. You're not haughty. Because if you're thinking like you're more righteous than somebody else, you're not. You're not doing this either. But stay in your word and pray so much for those who are here. Pray that something comes their way. I'm doing it right now. That takes that. I'm just hearing what I want to hear from these pastors. Pray something takes them away from that. I'll pray for those you care about that are here. Those who hear my voice. Pray for those in my life that are here. Let's not be Demas. Let's not be falling in love with the world. Let's not wander away from the faith and have ourselves impaled with a lot of pain because they made blank their goal. And it says, run into ruin and destruction. That's not necessarily talking about right now. Paul's the one dealing with a lot of pain and destruction right now in his life. He knows that their future is nothing but pain and destruction because they've chosen hell over following Jesus. They've chosen hell, eternity. That's what scares me, is like people who are choosing eternity for the temporary. Let's not do that. Choose the little bit of suffering here for an eternity of suffering, going to hell. You might have some good times following those who tickle your ears, telling what you want to hear. But when you're in front of that judgment seat, and he says, "Depart from me, I never knew you," that's going to be some scary words to hear. And I pray that those close to me and that anybody who hears this, that's not you. Hope you guys have a good night, or whatever time you hear this. And just keep pressing on. Stay in your word. And don't look for people who just tell you what you want to hear and excuse your sin. Don't do that. There's plenty of them out there. Reach out for people who are going to convict you of your sin. Reach out to those.